So our last video was about cities I thought should be bulldozed and started over. Basically, cities that have just sucked for so long, they just need a refresh. You know, restart, whatever you want to call it. Well, as you can imagine, this set the comment section ablaze. Not with the normal comments I get of people defending the cities that I'd mentioned, but people disagreeing with the cities I had picked. People had strong opinions on what cities need a do-over. So today we're looking at the cities that our subscribers felt should have been on that list. We aren't ranking these by any one stat, just by how often people left comments saying the city should have been bulldozed. Now, I also looked at the ones that are hidden because of profanity and things like that. Yes, I have profanity, at least most profanity, blocked from the comment section. So if you ever want a comment to be seen, make sure you don't add any extra profanity or racial slurs or things like that. We'll also be doing neighborhoods in major cities that need to be bulldozed, so leave a comment and tell me which ones you think should be on that list. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Portland, Oregon. Now this one I really don't agree with. Portland is not that great right now. I mean, serious homeless problem, crime's on the rise. We had riots a few years ago, like every single night for like 90 days. That was a hoot. I did get some good footage of that. So if you ever want to see that, go over to my vlogging channel. I went down there during that and just filmed. It was amazing. Not in a good way. But Portland right now is going through a rough patch, and it has been for about 5 or 6 years. I'm not denying that. I just don't think it ranks up there with some of the worst in the country. That being said, the total crime rate in Portland right now is 124% above the national average. The violent crime rate is only 35% above the national average. Now, if you don't watch these all the time, you might think 35% is pretty high. No, there's some cities in this country that are over 200 and 300% above the national average. So keep that in mind. Where we do have a problem is property crime. There's a lot of people down on their luck in Portland, Oregon, and they steal stuff to get by and just not have a job. I don't know. I'm not going to get into why they do it. We just have a lot of property crime. Nothing like coming out to your car in the morning, your catalytic converter's gone. Did you know crime rate normally goes down in bad weather in almost every single city in the United States, except for Seattle and Portland? It actually picks up. I think a good 20% of Portland could be mowed down and we really wouldn't miss it. Number 9, Oakland, California. Oakland, California has had a bad reputation for a lot of years. When you look at their stats, the only thing that is good is the amenities, like the things they have to do there. They got plenty to do. Their housing is expensive. Their cost of living is through the roof. Their employment numbers aren't great. Their schools don't get good numbers. And their crime rate is pretty bad. So I could see this one going on the list. So you see where they stand. Their total crime rate is 175% above the national average, and their violent crime rate is 233% above the national average, with property crime being about 164% above. Oakland does have some pretty scary parts. There's some neighborhoods there that you really have no business being in. If you're a tourist and end up in this neighborhood driving or walking or whatever, you might as well change your title from tourist to victim because you're going to be one. But the stats suck and they still got a high cost of living. Their cost of living is actually 60% above the national average. I think you need to bulldoze about 25% of Oakland and it might be an okay place. Just start from scratch. Number 8, Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey 5 years ago would have been the top of this list as the absolute worst. I mean, their crime was out of control. Their poverty is through the roof. They had no jobs. Serious drug issues throughout the city. Their stats still suck, but they're not as bad as they were 5 years ago. Years ago when I did a list on this, like one of the first ones I did, I was reading an article about a guy who was beat into a coma by 3 women. One of them was hitting him with a Target bag. I guess it was one of those cloth ones, but she had sodas in it. She was hitting him with it because I guess this guy was married to all 3 of them. Good times in Camden, New Jersey. Almost 40% of the population of Camden, New Jersey lives below the poverty line. The rest of New Jersey, it's almost 11%, 10.9. But if you want to look at their crime, it really stands out. Their total crime rate is 60% above the national average, which is respectable. Their property crime is only 10% above the national average, which isn't terrible. Where they shine is the violent crime, 313% above the national average. They don't have a bunch of thieves getting ahead. They got a bunch of dudes out for revenge, I think. I think about 30% of Camden, New Jersey could stand a good bulldozing. You know, start from scratch. And there's still an argument that it's more like 70% could really use a bulldozing. Number 7, Rockford, Illinois. Rockford, Illinois is a little over an hour northwest of downtown Chicago, and in the last few years, it's shown up more often on these negative lists. You're talking about a place that has a quality of life score that's around 51. In my opinion, if you're under 70, you're not doing great. Anything above 80 is a really nice place to live. In the 90s, perfect place to live, almost. But when you're in the 50s and almost dropping into the 40s, you suck. And Rockford, Illinois sucks. Their total crime rate is 92% above the national average. Their property crime, 70% above the national average. Their violent crime rate, again, another place that's excelling in violent crime, 203% above the national average. Good news is, it doesn't cost much to live here. The question is, how long can you live there before becoming the victim of a violent crime? The thing about Rockford, Illinois is it doesn't look that bad downtown. Their downtown area is actually pretty nice, very clean. It's not bad. It's when you start getting into the neighborhood, you're like, oh my God, what's going on here? Why are so many blocks missing homes? Why does that dog have an eye patch and one leg? And why is that man burning tires? Those are normally the thoughts that go through your head when you get out into the neighborhoods of Rockford, Illinois. So much for city services in this place. Look at it, that's like a cable line, or I doubt it's an electrical line, but it's got vines growing on it, so much so it's hanging down. Who's in charge of this neighborhood? I think bulldozing about 26% of Rockford, Illinois would be a step in the right direction. The good news is they have so many vacant lots, it really won't be that hard. Number 6. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore, Maryland. Now we're getting into the ones that showed up a whole bunch. Baltimore, Maryland showed up a whole bunch. In recent years, Baltimore is starting to develop a good tech industry, which I've said before, but I think in the future, this will help Baltimore maybe turn it around. One of Baltimore's biggest problems is the crime rate. It is ridiculous. I mean, there are no slouches in any of the crime categories. They go all out for all of them. There are some neighborhoods in Baltimore, Maryland that you should not go down unless you have an armored car, and then maybe. Their total crime rate is 163% above the national average. Their violent crime rate is 379% above the national average. Property crime is about 120% above. Oddly, they're not doing as bad in poverty level. It's only 23% above the national average, which compared to the rest of Maryland, which is 9.9%. So they're not doing terrible. Not good, but not terrible. I think Baltimore could stand to lose quite a few entire blocks. Just put them to the ground. Probably about 36% of this city could go away. And I mean, if you relocate everyone, not many people would miss these neighborhoods. Number 5, Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan is our first Michigan city of 2 planned Michigan cities on this list. People feel very strongly about Michigan cities and the need for them to be bulldozed or dynamited in some cases. I saw a lot of requests for that. I had one person in the comment section of the last video going on about bulldozing people's homes. Like, I can't believe someone would actually want to bulldoze someone's home, and it's a figure of speech. Nobody's really advocating to go bulldoze neighborhoods. I mean, some of them are in such bad shape, there's almost no fixing them, so that might be the end result, but we're not saying relocate everyone and actually bulldoze their homes. Breathe in, breathe out, relax. Remember, being offended is not a skill. Flint made national headlines some years back when they decided to switch their water system, and they showed videos of the water coming out of the people's taps, and it was like pretty much brown. It looked like raw sewage coming out of people's sinks. And that wasn't their biggest problem. I mean, it's a horrible situation, but their crime has always been their biggest problem. These days, their crime's a little weird, and I'm going to explain some things to you on this one, and it's kind of unique. First of all, you should know that about 44% of Flint, Michigan lives below the poverty line, okay? So keep that in mind. That's like the highest I've ever seen of a percentage of people living below the poverty line. When you look at their crime rate, their total crime rate is only 17% above the national average. That's not bad. Their violent crime rate is 181% above the national average. That's bad. Their property crime is 13% below the national average. The reason for that is everyone's so broke, there's nothing to steal. Now, this one probably could stand to lose about 40%. Now, the reason I keep giving this percentage is I look where most of the crime and most of the poverty is and where most of the rundown buildings are, and I kind of estimate how much of the town that actually is. And Flint could stand to lose about 40% of the town. Get a bulldozer, dynamite, giant eraser, who knows? Number 4, Chicago. Chicago, Illinois isn't as bad as a lot of people think. Sure, they lead the country in murders, okay? Now, we've explained this before. I even had Bry the math guy make an explanation on why this is. They have more people than the next one in line. So when you go by the per capita, Chicago's not that bad. When you got someplace like East St. Louis, Illinois, which has like 600 violent crimes for every 10,000 residents, then you look at Chicago and it's actually like 300 violent crimes for every 10,000 residents. There's a big disconnect there. But most people think that Chicago is this horrible place. Now, here's the thing. Part of it is Southside Chicago is a frickin' nightmare. And if you don't know that already, welcome to the channel because I talk about it all the time. The rest of the city, for the most part, is in pretty good shape for a major city. Major cities rarely look like downtown Mayberry, but a lot of people did bring up Chicago, so here it is on the list. Now I'm going to give you these percentages and you're going to see that Chicago isn't as bad as they tell you on certain news outlets. They're not lying to you, they're just not giving you the whole story. Their total crime rate is 67% above the national average. Not good, but not as bad as they make it sound. Their violent crime rate is only 143% above the national average. Now, if you follow along with different news outlets and stuff like that, you would have sworn that was going to be about 850% above the national average. No, it's only 143% above. Not great, but it's not as bad as people make you think. And their property crime is only 52% above the national average. Southside Chicago takes up about a quarter of Chicago, and I would say they could really do without that. So I would bulldoze Southside Chicago to make the city a better place. Number 3, Jackson, Mississippi. The poverty in Jackson, Mississippi since, I don't know, before the Civil War has always been really high. Right now, the poverty level in Jackson is 30.7%. And that's a little bit better than they've been in recent decades. Mississippi overall is 22.3% above. Now, there's a few different things that go into why Jackson, Mississippi always shows up on people's radar as a horrible place to live. It's the poverty, the infrastructure, employment numbers are horrible, and even the people that do have jobs, they are severely underpaid. Their housing is horrible, their schools area vibe gives an F, and their quality of life is 55. Good news is the cost of living is pretty low, but their total crime rate is 126% above the national average. Violent crime rate isn't terrible. It's only 94% above the national average, and property crime is 132% above the national average. Now, 94% is pretty high, but I'm talking about compared to the other ones on this list, 94 is not terrible. Compare that to Malibu, California, and it's pretty bad. Malibu's 12% below the national average. Jackson, Mississippi probably be in better shape if they bulldozed about 39% of the town. Sadly, that was almost taken care of for them. They had major flooding this year. It was pretty bad. Number 2, Detroit, Michigan. Now we get into the two cities that showed up the absolute most. I mean, these two blew the rest out of the water. Everybody knows Detroit is in bad shape. It has been since, I don't know, the 60s probably, but it really picked up steam in the suckage department in the 1980s. Detroit's another one of those places that's revamping their downtown, and it looks pretty good, and things are looking bright downtown. It's when you get out into the neighborhoods, you're all, this is a hellscape. Some areas are still livable, but a lot of areas are not fit for human consumption. The total crime in Detroit, Michigan right now is 130% above the national average. Their violent crime rate is 462% above the national average, with their property crime only being 64% above the national average. Again, they have so many people that are dead broke. There's nothing to steal. I mean, all the copper plumbing was torn out of the abandoned homes years ago. Detroit could probably stand to lose, I would say, 50% of their neighborhoods, and their stats would jump up like they sat on an electric fence. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link for that down below. We'd love it if you went over and watched some videos and maybe subscribe. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana was by far the most suggested city on this list. People got a Jones for talking trash about Gary, Indiana. Sadly, I had an army buddy that was from Gary, Indiana. He just passed away last week from cancer. Gerald Bynum. He was a good guy. But he was from Gary, Indiana, and he got out when he could, like the mid-80s. Gary, Indiana is another one of those places that has a lot of vacant lots, and it's been going downhill for quite some time. I mean, beyond the 80s. I mean, much earlier than the 80s. I would say Gary's heyday was somewhere around 1950. It's like 70 years of suckage right there. Now, we're going by how often it was suggested, and it was suggested far more often than any other city, but their stats aren't as bad, especially when it comes to the crime. Their total crime rate's only 75% above the national average. Violent crime rate's only 43% above the national average. That's not terrible. Property crime's 82% above the national average. Again, not terrible. Their poverty, though, is 39.8% above the national average. That's horrible. The jobs they do have, which they don't have many of, they are very low-paying jobs. Their housing sucks. Area Vibes gives their schools an F. Just not a great place to live. I think Gary, Indiana could stand to lose about 45% of the city. More manageable, less run-down neighborhoods. They'd be doing good then. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a productive day, and be nice to each other.